It's November 8th, and the presidential election year is 1 year away. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was a shocking twist, as officials say the so-called hero cop in northern Illinois committed suicide after he was caught embezzling department funds. The state legislature debates campaign finance laws and reforming the Government Accountability Board. A Russian airliner goes down in the Sinai and terrorism is suspected. The Packers lose an ugly one in Denver and face another undefeated team later today. Oscar Mayer shuts down in Madison, and details of the massive Pacific trade deal are finally released. But we start with this coming Tuesday's debate. The candidates are headed here to Milwaukee for the fourth Republican presidential debate, but two familiar faces will not be on the main stage. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie and former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee have been polling so low, they have been moved to the so-called undercard debate. Center stage is the main event, Donald Trump, and two candidates who have been surging lately, Ben Carson and Marco Rubio. The debate occurs as Jeb Bush struggles to regain his mojo. After a weak performance in the last debate, Bush has been slumping in the polls, leading some critics to wonder how long the son and brother of former presidents can stay in this race. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, the managing editor of RightWisconsin.com, Colin Roth, defense attorney Dan Adams, and media trackers Brian Sickma. I'll start with you, Brian. Is this a make or break for Jeb Bush this coming Tuesday here in Milwaukee?
It's not a make or break because I think he's got enough money to last for a little while in this race. So there's going to be a point where it's not make or break, but it's going to be make or break in the sense that can he continue to convince people he's a viable candidate? Because there's a media cycle story going on right now that's kind of on a death watch. Are we going to see the end of his campaign? He has way too much cash for it to be the immediate end of it, but he could be relegated to obscurity for the remainder of this campaign.
Yeah, but the problem is he's been spending money, and it doesn't seem to be moving the needle at all. He spent more than $6 million up in New Hampshire, and he's still stuck at 7% in the polls. How long can that go on?
Well, he's got that super PAC behind him, so they've got about $100 million. That's a lot of money that they could spend. So if he wants to find a way to last, he can survive, but it's not looking good for him right now.
Okay, who has the most to gain or lose in this this Tuesday's debate here?
Well, I think the people who have lost have already done so. Chris Christie and Huckabee being cut off and not put on the stage, which I think is really a mistake for the GOP. I mean, what is the statistical difference between really Rand Paul, who's got like 4%, and Huckabee and Christie, who have 2.5%?
So
it's unbelievable. I think you guys are shooting yourselves in the feet.
Okay, Colin Roth.
Yeah, I agree, and it seems there's an unfair way, especially given how bad the polls were in the last week in that Kentucky race, and it seems like considering where the candidates are campaigning, New Hampshire and Iowa, people like Christie are surging a little bit in New Hampshire. People like Mike Huckabee are doing better in Iowa. Maybe those things should be taken into consideration.
But nobody's going to be talking about those guys. In fact, this will be the first debate where the center of attention does not appear to be on Donald Trump. It looks like the center of attention is going to be on Ben Carson. How is he going to respond to all of the attacks on whether or not he fabricated parts of his resume, and what he thinks about the Egyptian pyramids? And of course, as Marco Rubio moves up in the polls, he is getting criticism as well. Would you agree?
I agree, and it'll be interesting to see who can emerge. I agree with Brian. I don't think there's a way that Jeb can get his mojo back, but I also don't think he jumps out before any votes are cast. And yes, the storylines will be somebody like Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz. Do they really start to break out of the pack?
But didn't they say that about Mr. Establishment, John McCain, 2008? Could that be just replaying?
This election does feel different than that, and it certainly feels from the point of view of Jeb Bush that nobody really has much of an appetite for a dynastic Bush-Clinton fight again. Can Ben Carson? Is Ben Carson in trouble on these questions about whether or not he might have exaggerated or fabricated part of his story as a child?
No, I don't think so. I think this is something that's going to evaporate in the next couple of days, and I really don't see the other candidates attacking him. You know, that could backfire.
But I think Trump is already attacking him.
But this could be the Rubio show, because Rubio has been the prediction of a lot of people all along, and he's slowly but surely creeping up. I would even project at this particular point, he's going to be the candidate he's going to be the nominee.
All right, let's go back to Ben Carson. Because, I mean, a lot of Ben Carson's appeal has been the fact that he's honest, he's a decent person, and he has this incredible inspirational life story. And so now on Friday we had, the controversy about whether or not he was admitted to West Point, whether or not he got a scholarship to West Point, whether or not he actually did stab somebody when he was a kid. When do we ever have a presidential candidate who basically said, no, really, I was a dysfunctional kid. I really did try to kill people, so how big a threat does that pose to Ben Carson?
Well, this only poses a threat if Ben Carson lets it pose a threat. If he's able to show that this is media bias, if he's able to clarify either the facts of the story that maybe Politico and these other media outlets have not clarified, or if he's able to just humanize himself and say, sure, I had a rough background as a kid, this is who I am. It's that honesty factor I think is going to go a long way, because that's why people like him right now. He's a genuine candidate. They see in him an honest person who's a complete outsider, and so if he uses this right, it's not going to hurt him at all.
Well, but it can, because if in fact, your life story is what you're running on, and people start to raise questions about the veracity of your life story, that's a problem. I think the significance of this debate is going to be that afterwards, I think we're going to have some more candidates drop out. I mean, it's interesting to realize that since Scott Walker dropped out, no Republican candidate has dropped out of this race. So who goes first?
But Bush has reduced his staff. That's a short sign that something's percolating here.
Yeah, but you don't think he's going to be the first one to drop out, do you?
I think it'll be after the first straw poll. Then he's going to drop out. I don't see him getting any traction.
I would think that maybe George Pataki would think it's time to drop out.
Santorum, there's a few names that should get out.
I mean, when you don't even get invited to the kids' table, when you are kicked off the main stage, you're kicked off the kids' table, you're basically out on the curb. Maybe it's time to think about something else. What is your glass half full? What is your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, my glass is half full because the county's free bus ride program for seniors and disabled residents has been a major success. My glass is half empty because the program cost 10 times the original projection, and now the transit system is facing $1 million shortfall.
Yeah, who could have possibly seen that coming? Colin Roth.
My glass is half empty because Michael Bloomberg is about to spend a bunch of money attacking Attorney General Brad Schimmel for his lawsuit against the EPA. It's half full because Michael Bloomberg has a terrible record at moving the political dial outside of Manhattan.
Dan Adams.
Charlie, my glass is half full because there was a successful bipartisan effort in the state legislature this week. My glass is half empty because the bipartisanship was a vote to allow more borrowing for highway construction, $350 million more on the taxpayer's credit card. Rather than borrow and spend, lawmakers should put their heads together and stabilize road funding for the long term.
Brian Stickma.
Well, my glass is half full because the head of the GAB finally admitted the truth, that nonpartisan judges actually do have partisan preferences. But my glass is half empty because some Republican senators still believe that we need retired judges overseeing some parts of Wisconsin state government because those judges supposedly lack partisan bias.
Well, my glass is half full because polls showed that the Democratic candidate for governor would win last week's election in Kentucky by 5 points. Instead, he lost by 8 points. My glass is half empty because the polls there were off by a whopping 13 points, but we still take them seriously and use them to choose who gets to be in the presidential debates. How does that make sense? Next on Sunday Insight, a big blow to the state's economy. Could anything have been done to keep Oscar Mayer from closing its Madison plant? A blow to the state economy as Oscar Mayer announces that it will be moving out of Madison, taking 1,000 jobs with it when it closes its production plant and moves its corporate headquarters to Chicago. That will end a century-long presence in Wisconsin for Oscar Mayer. And, of course, Democrats, we're used to this, were quick to point fingers at Republican Governor Scott Walker. But the question is, Colin Roth, could the state have done anything, anything at all to stop this move?
No, this was baked in the cake when Kraft merged with Heinz, and this is part of a consolidation that's occurring in a number of different states that include both Republican and Democratic governors. It doesn't make it any less serious for the people who are about to lose employment there. But to say Republican policies could have done something different without pointing to a single policy.
Yeah, but you do have the kind of the connecting the dots. This was a bad week. This last week, we had Enjoy Global. You had S.C. Johnson. You had a number of jobs that were, being lost in the state of Wisconsin. Headquarters moving. Is this a reflection of Wisconsin? Is there something? If you were Governor Walker, what would you do to respond to this?
Well, something they all have in common is manufacturing, and the manufacturing sector has been really hampered in this state and nationally in the last 6-7 months. Even as the jobs picture in the country has picked up, manufacturing is still getting hit tough. So it's something that needs to be talked about.
Dan Adams.
Well, I'm kind of annoyed by the politicians on each side trying to pin the tail on the donkey on this. And listen, it is a bigger factor. There's macro factors going on. And frankly, in the long term, is anybody annoyed that mass-produced cased meats is going the way of the rotary telephone? I mean, this is what happens.
Yes, thousands of people and families that are supported by that.
Well, but in the short term, yes, we should all empathize with them.
I understand that on the east side, you east side tofu eaters are going, who eats bologna? But I mean, seriously.
But in a market economy, which gives us so much abundance and wealth, these things happen. The growing pains suck in the short term, but in the long term, we're all going to be better.
These things happen. Well, I don't know that we're going to be better off. But I thought the problem with this, of course, the political problem was that you had Oscar Mayer, you had the company shutting down in 5 states, 3 of which have Democratic governors, but that didn't stop John Erpenbach and others and Peter Barker from trying to score some partisan points. But it really does raise the question, once again, how much control do state governments have over jobs? They talk about it all the time, but ultimately, they don't have that much leverage when it comes to some of these national and multinational companies, do they?
No, you're exactly right, Charlie. I mean, I've been asking myself, why would anyone want to move to Illinois right now with the way their economy is and their business climate? And so states can do a lot of things to encourage, but you can't mandate. The 2 main areas where states can impact employment and job creation or tax rates, and Wisconsin could use to lower its manufacturing tax rate, and then also regulation. We could do a better job of that. But in this case, this company wasn't something that was heavily regulated in Wisconsin, so it's not going to be necessarily made desirable to stay here because we changed our regulations.
Okay. Well, here's a black eye for the state. We're supposed to be open for business, but I guess that door swings both ways. And they're going to Chicago, of all places. That's pizza place. I think it's. The interesting thing is I heard that Scott Walker said he was going to talk with the Wiener folks,
and they said that they were going to work with him to sell that plant.
Right, and then on Friday there was talk about he's going to help those who lost their jobs to get new jobs. Now I don't know where these new jobs are going to come from, but it seems as if by saying I'm going to help them get jobs, this is a done deal.
Well, it is a done deal, and one of the I think you'll be successful in getting some of those people jobs because because there actually are a lot of manufacturing jobs in the state of Wisconsin that are open.
Wieners?
No, there may be some retraining, but the reality is that a lot of companies in this state are having a hard time getting workers. It's kind of a puzzle. But look, if folks really don't like what's happening with these manufacturing jobs, wait till we see what happens if the EPA comes in with that clean power rule, what happens if electricity rates rise. At some point, if you keep burdening regulation, if you keep raising taxes, bad things are going to happen. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, mine is to the teachers union. Your attacks on School Board Director Wendell Harris for voting to provide poor children with educational options backfired. You should stop now, or you still have any friends left.
Colin Roth.
My advice is for presidential campaigns to not underestimate the power of humanizing your candidate. Check out the viral video of Chris Christie talking about drug addiction to see what I mean.
Colin copied me. To the Law and Order crowd, listen to another former prosecutor, Chris Christie's recent speech on drug addiction. He eloquently makes the case that addiction is a public health, not criminal justice crisis. It's a great speech. Google it.
It sounds like you were copying Colin. Brian Sickman.
Well, my unsolicited advice is for Wisconsin voters. Senator Russ Feingold is running to get his old job back, but this week we learned that a controversial Obama EPA regulatory rule was the brainchild of Feingold during his time in the Senate. The EPA rule will kill many families supporting blue-collar jobs in Wisconsin if it's allowed to go into effect. If voters like those jobs, they may not want to give Feingold his old job back.
Well, my unsolicited advice is to state Democrats, if you really, really do care about losing manufacturing jobs, you might want to rethink your support for higher taxes, job-killing environmental regulations, and your opposition to things like mining. There is a cause and effect, you know. Next on Sunday Insight, is it patriotism if you're paid for it? It's called paid patriotism. You know those moving tributes at Lambeau Field or Miller Park where the team salutes servicemen and women, the moving homecomings, the flags unfurled. Well, It turns out that you have been paying for them. A new Senate report says the Defense Department has paid out millions of dollars to professional and collegiate sports teams to stage those events, which a lot of fans probably thought had been done out of gratitude and respect, not for cash. An audit of the program found that the Green Bay Packers made $200,000 from their 2012 and 2014 contracts. The Brewers got $80,000 last year, and the UW Badgers also got a cut. The Wisconsin Army National Guard paid the Badgers $170,000 for marketing last year. So, Michael Holt, as the veteran on the panel, is there anything wrong with that?
No, because it's part of a recruitment effort, in essence, that you're trying to expose a branch of the service to the American public. You know, I still get some tingles, you know, when I see some of this stuff, and you know, I was
You didn't know that it was being paid for.
No, I didn't know that, and I think there'll probably be some changes now. If it gives the Green Bay Packers a black eye or the Brewers a black eye, then they'll start accommodating a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm not outraged about it, but I am disappointed because I guess I did think that this was, you know, the way of, you know, these, you know, millionaire ball players and teams giving it back to the people who had made these sacrifices, and to find out they were cashing these big checks is a little bit creepy.
Oh, it is a little bit creepy, and there is, you know, some of that cash, as Michael pointed out, did go for recruiting, and where better to recruit healthy young Americans than at sporting events, right? I mean, they're interested in what's going on. It's a great place to recruit, but a lot of this money also went for just ceremonies honoring veterans. I think that's where the rub came in. I think that's why Senators McCain and Flake conducted this investigation. Now, to their credit, the Department of Defense has changed those requirements and has now said that you can't sponsor patriotism. If you need to sponsor recruiting, that's okay, but you can't sponsor these patriotic sports.
Are we surprised by anything that the criminal syndicate known as the NFL does these days? But seriously, recruitment's a big issue. 70% of 17 to 24-year-olds in America are too fat to fight, or don't have the education, or have a criminal record, and just can't get into the military. So they're going above and beyond trying to get people in the service.
Okay,
credit to you.
I mean, if patriotism is defined as love of country, this is a marketing ploy. I mean, it was paid for. There was no love of country involved in this. Am I disappointed in it? Yes. Does it surprise me? Not all that much.
Yeah, I guess part of it is I do understand why marketing is necessary, and as Dan points out, it's hard to do this. We do have a volunteer military. If you have a volunteer military, you're going to have to spend money to get people to recruit. On the other hand, using returning soldiers, you know, who come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, to use them as props in a marketing tool, I guess that doesn't pass the smell test. I'm not as upset. I know that John McCain and Jeff Flake, the senators who released this report, were outraged about the waste of taxpayer dollars by the Department of Defense. I'm not as outraged about that as I am kind of disappointed in the teams who I would think, you know, had the option of going, hey, you know, we're good. You know, you don't need to pay us for this. We are more than happy you know, we're so blessed. We are more than happy to honor these men and women and these servicemen. You don't need to give us, you know, big dollars, but they didn't say that. So what is it you don't get? Let's go around the table this week. Michael Holt, you're first.
What I don't get is how former Milwaukee police officer Christopher Manny can kill an unarmed black man across the street from City Hall, be fired, and is rewarded with a $50,000 annual disability benefit for life.
Colin Roth.
Well, what I don't get is how environmentalists can cheer the rejection of the Keystone XL pipeline when it will just result in more oil on trucks and trains.
Dan Adams.
I don't get Milwaukee's rush to create bureaucracies, public and nonprofit, often redundant for everything. Want to support entrepreneurship? Start a business or invest in one. Education? Tutor a kid. Help a disadvantaged community? Just do it.
Brian Sikma.
Well, what I don't get is why Senate President Mary Lozick is stonewalling efforts to repeal Wisconsin's 1939 passed minimum markup law, a measure that stops consumers from saving money. Ahead of the Christmas shopping season, one would think Senator Lozick would stand up for free markets and consumers.
You would think that. Well, what I don't get is why Ben Carson doesn't respond to charges that he fabricated the story about getting a scholarship from West Point by saying, at this point, what difference does it make? Get it? Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, my winner, the Milwaukee Police Department. Last week, the MPD arrested 19 members of a terrorist street gang. I hope they sent them all to Guantanamo Bay. Losers, there are 27,000 Milwaukee households with incomes under $10,000. We're talking about probably 100,000 people living on fumes, and not a word from any city, county or state politician.
But they created an office for that. Colin Roth.
My winners this week are voters around the country who once again rejected liberal policies and politicians at the ballot box. The Democratic Party is decimated at the state level, and last Tuesday's results only made it worse. My losers this week are the 4 Republican state senators who held up a GAB reform bill only to add retired judges back into the mix. Were the failures of the GAB not enough to convince you that retired judges add nothing?
Dan Adams.
My loser, Joe Glinowitz, the now disgraced police officer and con man whose staged suicide terrorized Fox Lake, Illinois, a town just over our state line. My winners are the 2 Milwaukee police officers who this week were forced to defend themselves and return fire at assailants who shot at them during a traffic stop. These courageous officers showed the courage and ability that the vast majority of law enforcement officers display every day.
Brian Sickler.
My losers are State Representative Lisa Subeck, Chris Taylor, and other Democrats who unveiled a new gun control plan in the state legislature. Legislation would ban some of the most popular hunting rifles and shotguns on the market today and outlaw nearly every kind of semi-automatic pistol. Wisconsin residents who own one of the banned guns will be required to turn in their guns to the state. When Democrats tell you they don't want to take your guns, don't believe them.
Well, my loser, all of the tens of thousands of working-class Americans who would have gotten jobs working on the Keystone XL pipeline that was canceled by President Obama on Friday. Winners, Milwaukee, which will be at the center of the political universe again this coming Tuesday night when the GOP debate comes to town. Let's show them all a good time. Thanks for joining us. Join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.